Welcome to L&D Disrupt, the podcast dedicated to helping you overcome workplace challenges and prepare for the future of work today. I'm your host, Nelson Sivalingam, and I'll be speaking with the movers, shakers, and path breakers in L&D who are reshaping their organizations right now. Join us each week as we delve into the highs and lows of work in the industry to get to the real nitty-gritty stuff that you actually care about. In this week's episode, we have the amazing Lavinia Mehedințu, Learning and Development Content Curator at Offbeat. There's no doubt about it, Lavinia has a genuine passion for learning, and her enthusiasm in this episode is bound to rub off on you. The conversation is packed with advice to help you level up your content curation with fascinating insights on behavioral science and data-driven analytics thrown into the mix. I love this conversation and I'm sure you will too. Lavinia, welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm really glad to be here.
I genuinely feel like I'm chatting with an L&D celebrity. I feel like I've seen your name everywhere. You know, obviously follow the great work you're doing and the content you're putting out. So yeah, it's really great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
So there's a lot to kind of talk about, and I just really wanted to dive into the kind of work you're doing, which is essentially facilitating learning amongst L&D professionals. Whilst also there's a lot L&D professionals can learn about the way you're doing the learning in the first place, right? So it's quite meta. And I wanted to start with, I guess, where it seems you started, which is with content curation, right? So maybe give us the kind of origin story of why you decided there was value in curating all of this great content.
Yeah. So in my job, I usually get so many new projects, so I don't know how to solve the issues that are brought to my table. And I need to go into research to search for examples of how others have been doing things or frameworks or other solutions and so on. So I'm also kind of a research geek. So I'm always going on the 20th page of Google, but I also know that can take a lot of time, So I wasn't sharing those resources I was finding on the internet before the pandemic. But I guess when it hit, because I had so much free time on my table, I thought, okay, I might as well do this and maybe some people will find it useful. And a lot of people find it useful, and that's great for me. So basically, Offbeat started, and it still is a newsletter, a weekly newsletter for L&D professionals. Yeah, coming out of this need of continuously learning while you work, and my research geekiness, let's say.
So let's kind of dive into that kind of research geekiness, right? Because the audience has grown for the newsletter, and so has that changed in any way your approach to curation? Where when you originally started, it may have been, do I find this useful, and therefore others might. But has that approach to curation changed?
I think there are two things that changed. The first one is that the resources I was putting in the newsletter first, all of them were coming from my research, But now, as the newsletter grew, I am linked to so many people that are sharing all kinds of resources, So I can tap into those minds as well. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that I look at analytics. Like I know which resources are clicked in each newsletter. So I kind of know what topics might be interesting to people. And also there's another thing that's been happening is that people reach out, because they know that I might have some resources, they reach out. So yeah, I have a list of things that I know I should be tapping into in each newsletter.
Right. And do you find when you speak to L&D professionals whether they use curation much within their organizations for learning and development?
So, I would say it's a bit harder, I have to be honest, because I'm curating resources for my industry, so I am really connected to the needs of my peers. Whereas when you curate resources as an L&D professional for another field, that's going to be a bit harder. So what people are doing, and I think it's really effective, is that they are basically using their colleagues and maybe asking them the resources and the sources they look at to help them with curation. And other people maybe use all types of platforms to do that work for them.
And I thought what was interesting, Lavinia, with what you said was around you look at the click-through rate and the engagement to which is often the step that's missing in a lot of L&D functions in organization, where I'm sure there are companies out there who are sending emails out with, here's something useful we found, but there's never necessarily the kind of follow-up to see, did someone click through? What is the kind of feedback loop? And so how do you think L&D teams can really adopt that practice of using data to improve the way they curate?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting question. So I have a small background in marketing, so maybe that helped as well. So I think that connecting with other fields that are doing that really, really good, and obviously marketing and product might be those fields. It can really help. When it comes to newsletters, marketing has been doing that for so many years, and they really know the drill. They know what to look for. So I think we should be stepping out a bit of our comfort zone, which is basically adult learning and organizing learning programs, to learn how other fields might help our work, especially analytics and looking at data.
What else do you think L&D can learn from? We can learn from kind of marketing and products you mentioned. What are the other things where you see these are great nuggets that we can kind of steal from these functions and we can also use them?
Yeah, I think being really focused on the user, it's something that both product and marketing are doing very well. And we can learn that as well, having the learner in mind every time we build our programs, and using all sorts of tools like, personas, or the way they do research as well. That's more, I think that product or UX designers have these methods of doing research that are really science-based, I might dare to say, whereas us as L&Ds can still learn about that. Yeah.
Right. And why do you think that is? I completely see what you're talking about, the kind of idea of being user focused and really trying to solve that user's problem. It sounds obvious, right? And especially if you look at it from the approach of they're your customer, and so you want to solve the customer's problem. And if you're not, then you're really wasting resources. And that idea seems obvious, but just like you, I see it quite often where it doesn't happen, right? It's so often training programs are built, RFPs are put out without any involvement of the end user or the customer. Why do you think this happens in organizations?
Well, I think the fault can be split, because the business, and when I say the business, I think about people managers or our exec boards, come to us with solutions rather than problems. They say, let's organize a training to solve like any problem, like training could solve, all the world's problems. And historically, we've been executing, those requests. And I think that we did not take the time to take a step back, and analyze those requests, and maybe ask a bit more about the why and about our audience, to make sure that what we deliver might not be training actually, but it's closer to what our users need, So I think that's part of our problem, because as long as our internal clients, as you mentioned, are asking so little from us, I think we might be prone to sticking into the executioner's mindset.
Right. Yeah. And do you think there is too much of an expectation on the L&D teams when you're like, there's an expectation to solve, like you said, to solve every problem with some kind of training, and do you think, not maybe too much, but there's a misalignment in what is expected of L&D within a company?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Like, I think there's this misalignment between, what our clients are asking in terms of skills, because recently I've seen this trend of also asking, data analytics measuring impact, asking for campaigns, maybe marketing stuff, and other skills, and the truth is that we've been used to focusing a lot on adult learning and not much at, how I was saying before, looking at other fields. So yeah, I obviously don't think we can do it all. I do think that we can be aware of how those fields could help and be more active in learning from them. But yeah, we are still L&D people. We are still focused on adult learning, and yeah, that's still good, because our adult learning expertise can come in as a help, in finding solutions to the business problems.
And I guess that kind of leads nicely, Lavinia, to this idea of reaching out cross-function and learning from our peers, both inside and outside of the organization, is in essence what you've done with your community. Is what started off as a newsletter is now a thriving L&D community where people are coming together, sharing ideas, learning from each other, and which is another really kind of fundamental way of learning, which is often missed in organizations that are overly focused on just courses and training programs. So maybe tell me a bit about how you've built that community, right? How has it started, and what have you done to nurture and develop that community?
Yeah, I think we are just tapping into the power of community, because so far we've been one-sided, I might say. Like, I was sending resources and people would come to me, but they weren't, reaching to each other. And what we've been doing with our programs, because we recently launched one of our L&D programs, is that we've put a lot of focus on people sharing with each other. So we have all types of community sessions, that are not about a speaker that shares with others whatever he knows or she knows, but they are mostly about, okay, I know that, I know we have maybe the same challenge, or we know something about each other's challenges, and let's share. So I think there's this great power as a learning designer to know a lot about your audience and their similarities, their challenges, and how they can help each other, and make sure that you facilitate or nurture, knowledge sharing.
Great. And how do you go about, I guess, facilitating those interactions, right? I think one of the most common things we see in companies sometimes, where the culture is still developing, this culture of knowledge sharing, there's often a hesitance and oh, can we approve things before someone posts it and shares, and which kind of defeats the purpose of the kind of collaborative environment you're trying to build. So what can we do as L&D to kind of facilitate that and really help foster that community?
Yeah, so I would still start with having context about what everyone knows, and how they can help each other. This needs assessment, I might say, is still the first step, part of the process. And then maybe create all types of spaces where people can share, and they can be digital spaces, or they can be live spaces like we're having this talk we're having. But maybe not put so much emphasis on, okay, he or she knows that, and let's go there and listen, just listen, because that's a way that's a very passive way of learning. But maybe focusing more on, let's share, let's create this space for sharing. And yeah, even other types of programs like mentorship programs or reversed mentorship programs, can help, because they can foster this idea that as an organization, we're here to learn from each other, no matter where we are in the hierarchy, because if I'm a manager, that doesn't mean that I don't have I can have anything to learn from my peers or from my direct reports, so yeah, maybe have all types of interactions where you send this message that knowledge sharing is important.
Yeah, I love the idea of kind of reverse mentoring. And I know GE have been infamous for doing this for like the last 2 decades, and we're starting to see more companies doing it. And it's a great way where some of the best examples we've seen is where you've got essentially younger digital natives, mentoring more experienced senior talent on digital skills whilst getting access to the senior management team and learning from their career experience. So it really does become not even one way, it becomes a two-way mentoring and more of a knowledge exchange, which is powerful and it's compound as well. So yeah, definitely a big fan of that. So I guess building this community, Lavinia, what are some of the things that you've learned? Like, you've gone on quite a journey. I'm sure, when you sent out your first newsletter, I don't know how many people were receiving that newsletter, but you've come a long way from there. So what are the things, I guess, you've learned about building a newsletter in a community? But also, what are some of the things you've learned about L&D in the process of doing so?
Yeah, so I have to mention two things. One that is very personal, which is consistency,
Right.
being really consistent in what you're doing, because to answer your curiosity, maybe there were 40 people
Right.
subscribing to Offbeat in the first issue. And yeah, we've gone a long way, but everything happened because, every week I try to put in my best work to make the newsletter grow. The second thing I've learned through experience, obviously, is the power of community. Because every time I have an issue, a challenge in my work, I always, now I know that someone out there might be able to help, and I just reach out and ask the question. And although I said two, I have to add a third one, because there is something that I've learned about L&D, and it's a lot about maybe tapping into behavioral science as well, learning a bit more about how behaviors change to inform our work and make it better.
I just want to dive into that a bit more there, Lavinia, about let's expand on that idea of kind of behavioral science. How do you think it's not being used, and how can L&D use behavioral science better? And are there things that you would suggest they read, or resources that I'm sure you're doing it through the newsletter anyway, but anything that stands out for someone who's really interested in using behavioral science for how they do L&D?
Yeah, so what I think happens right now is that as humans, we adopt these trends, I might say. And to give you an example, because I think it's really powerful, we've been reading a lot about how a habit might stick after 30 days of repeating
Sure.
it, and I've been trying that, and yeah, I've been hearing a lot of chatter about, yeah, that's so powerful. And by reading a lot of research papers, because that's a resource I would send people to read more about. Yeah, I found out that's not true, and that was maybe so disappointing. But that's just one example of trends that stuck into our minds that might not be real. And yeah, one thing I would suggest people to go into is maybe go a bit beyond just books that are really popular and actually read more about those research papers that maybe informed those books. I know it's not easy, like it takes way more time to read the research papers because the language used in there, it's not as easy to grasp as books are. But from a scientific point of view, I think they are more accurate than books.
Yeah, another similar one for me was learning styles. I think even at school, I remember they got us to do a test, and at the end of it, they would tell you what learning style, and that was fixed in my head. I was like, I'm a visual person. This is how I learn, right? And anytime I wasn't learning that way, I was like, no, I need to go back to visual. And then, there's, actually a research paper that's now informed a lot of literature that's coming out. Is where there is no scientific evidence for learning styles. There are learning preferences, and definitely we might prefer different ways, but there is definitely not a wired learning style. So I definitely get the value of that. So before we go on to the rapid fire question section, Lavinia, what does the future hold for Offbeat? What do you see coming up over the next year?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So I think one of the things we've done is gather so many resources that right now are scattered across newsletter issues, and from a user point of view, it's not easy to get to them. So we're planning on putting them together in a way that people can filter easier through them. And I might look in the future for more Offbeat programs, because we are constantly thinking about other programs we can put out there, and obviously also improving them while interacting with our learners. Yep.
Yeah, love it. We're going to go into the rapid fire, Lavinia. I'm going to fire some questions and you can give me a relatively fast answer. First one is, how long does it take you to create a issue of your newsletter?
Okay, 5 to 6 hours per week.
Wow. Yeah. I'm assuming, do you spread that out or do you tend to intense couple of days?
I spread them out. During the week, I research for resources. And on Saturday, I spent about, 4 hours just digging into them and choosing the best ones.
Wow. How do you learn?
By doing, and just finding out things that I don't know and getting back to the community and maybe brainstorming and finding some answers.
What do you know now that you wish you knew at the start of your career?
Maybe that with discipline and passion and focus, you can learn everything.
What's the most important skill for someone in L&D today?
Being a self-directed learner.
I like that. What's the best bit of advice that someone's giving you?
Oh, that's a hard one. Maybe that things should not be that planned in my career as I would have thought that they should be, that I also can go through with my instinct and what I'm learning, by doing.
Right. And what's the one skill you would like to develop and why?
Oh, one. Okay. That's hard. So for my professional life, I can say one. I'm sorry. So for my professional life, I think learning a bit more about graphic design, UX design, and no-code tools because they are really trending right now. And for my personal life, improving my piano skills and swimming, I guess. Yeah.
That's it. Lavinia, you remember we promised each other we're going to do a duet in the next episode we do together, right? That's the deal. What's your best productivity hack?
Using the Pomodoro technique.
Yeah, love it. So what do you use? Do you use your phone, or have you got a clock? How do you set your timer?
I have an app on my laptop, and I use that.
No, I'm a big believer of it. I actually have this sticky clock that I take wherever I go to do it, and it's a game changer. And the last one is, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this? If you weren't doing the Offbeat newsletter, you weren't building this community, what else would you be doing?
So I learned about myself that I am a data geek, I might say. So maybe if I wouldn't have gone into HR and went on with my marketing career, maybe I would be into growth marketing right now.
Right.
So yeah, maybe that.
Lavinia, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was really nice.
I told you it was a good one. It's so refreshing to hear Lavinia talk about how we can step out of our comfort zone and learn from other disciplines. It's something I totally agree with and think we could do more of, especially with the growing demands on L&D. As always, if you'd like to connect, then you can find our details in the show notes, as well as information about Offbeat. Please share with your L&D pals and stay tuned for next week's episode.